The maid thought no one would see her tears in the darkness. What she didn't know was that the vampire king could hear every heartbeat within his castle walls, including hers. When he found her kneeling at his daughter's tomb, something ancient stirred in his chest, something he thought had died centuries ago. The night was silent, save for the whisper of wind through the ancient cemetery's iron gates. Moonlight cast pale shadows across rows of weathered tombstones, each marking a soul lost to time. At the far edge of this sacred ground stood a tomb unlike any other, marble white as bone, etched with symbols that seemed to shift in the moonlight. It belonged to Princess Alara, the vampire king's only daughter, dead for 3 years. Kira pulled her worn cloak tighter as she approached the tomb. Her hands trembled as she placed a single white rose at its base. She'd done this every week since becoming a maid in the castle, always in secret, always alone. Or so she believed. "You would have been 23 this spring," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she traced the princess's name carved in the stone. "I am so sorry I couldn't save you." The memories flooded back. 3 years ago, when Kira was just a village girl, she'd witnessed the princess's carriage accident. She'd held Alara's hand as life slipped away, powerless to help. The princess's final words still haunted her. "Find my father, tell him, the truth is buried with me." Kira had tried, but approaching the vampire king was impossible. He'd locked himself away after his daughter's death, ruling his kingdom through fear and cold commands delivered by his council. The warmth had died in him along with Alara. "I failed you," Kira sobbed, pressing her forehead against the cold marble. "I couldn't reach him. I couldn't tell him, tell me what?" The voice cut through the night like a blade through silk, deep, ancient, and deadly calm. Kira's blood turned to ice. She spun around, nearly losing her balance. There, emerging from the shadows between 2 mausoleums, stood the vampire king himself. King Damien Ashford was a figure from nightmares. Tall and imposing, he wore black robes that seemed to absorb the moonlight. His face was angular and pale, ageless, yet carrying the weight of centuries. But it was his eyes that truly terrified, crimson red, burning with an intensity that could pierce through lies and flesh alike. "Your Majesty," she gasped, dropping into a clumsy curtsy. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. "Rise," he commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. He moved closer, each step deliberate and silent. "You will answer my question. What were you supposed to tell me?" Kira's mind raced. She'd heard the stories. Servants who displeased the king simply vanished. His grief had made him cruel, unpredictable. Some said his heart had turned to stone the day they buried Alara. I was just paying respects, Your Majesty," she stammered. Liar. He was suddenly before her, moving faster than her eyes could track. His hand shot out, gripping her chin and forcing her to meet his gaze. Those red eyes bored into hers, searching, dissecting. "I heard you clearly," Damien said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I know you heard her. You heard her," she said. "You said you couldn't save her. You held her hand. You were there when my daughter died." Kira's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. The king's fingers were cold against her skin, his grip firm, but not painful, yet. Yes, she confessed, tears spilling anew. "I was just a village girl traveling to market. I heard the crash, saw the carriage overturned. I ran to help, but what?" His grip tightened slightly. "But it was too late. The injuries were too severe. I could only be with her, so she wouldn't die alone." Something flickered in the king's eyes. Pain? Rage? It vanished before Kira could be certain. "And what did my daughter say to you in her final moments? What truth did she speak of?" This was it, the moment Kira had dreaded and hoped for in equal measure. She reached slowly into her cloak, terrified he might strike her down for the sudden movement. Her fingers found the envelope, worn, sealed with wax bearing the princess's crest. "She gave me this," she said, her voice shaking. "She made me promise to bring it to you. But I was nobody, a peasant girl. I couldn't get near you. So I took a position as a maid in the castle. I've been trying to find the right moment for 3 years." Damien released her chin and snatched the letter from her hand. He stared at it, his expression unreadable. The princess's seal was unmistakable, a rose entwined with a crescent moon. "Why should I believe you didn't forge this?" he asked coldly. "Because I loved her," Kira burst out, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Princess Alara was kind to everyone. Once, when I was 12, my mother was sick. The princess was visiting our village. She saw me crying and stopped her entire procession. She gave me medicine for my mother and stayed until she was certain Mama would recover. I never forgot that. When I found her dying on that road, I wished it had been me instead." Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Damien's jaw clenched as he stared at the letter. His hand trembled. Slightly, the first sign of emotion Kira had seen from him. "Leave," he finally said. "Your Majesty, please. She wanted you to—" "I said leave." His voice cracked like thunder across the cemetery. Kira fled, her heart pounding, tears blurring her vision. Behind her, she heard no sound. But if she had looked back, she would have seen the vampire king sink to his knees before his daughter's tomb, clutching the letter as his shoulders shook with 3 years of suppressed grief. The tomb began to glow. Damien's fingers trembled as he broke the wax seal. 3 years. 3 years since he'd heard his daughter's voice, seen her smile, felt her hand in his own. The letter felt impossibly heavy, as if it contained not just words but the weight of all his failures as a father. The handwriting was unmistakably Alara's, elegant, flowing script with the slight rightward slant she'd developed from years of study. "Dearest father, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and my greatest fear has come to pass. I am so sorry for the pain I know you must be feeling. Please know that everything I did for our kingdom and for you." Damien's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing himself to continue reading. "Father, there is so much I never told you, so much I discovered that I kept hidden, not out of distrust, but out of love. You've carried the burden of our kingdom alone for so long. I wanted to shoulder some of that weight, to find solutions before bringing you more problems. 6 months ago, I learned of a threat to our kingdom, a curse that has been slowly draining the life from our lands. The crops failing, the livestock dying, the increase in illnesses among our people. These are not natural misfortunes. They are the symptoms of an ancient curse placed on our bloodline generations ago." Damien's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the words again. A curse? On his bloodline? This was impossible. He would have known, would have felt. "I know you must be shocked. I was too when I discovered the truth in the forbidden archives. The curse was placed by a witch named Morgaine Blackthorn 300 years ago, after our ancestor, King Aldrich, executed her daughter for practicing dark magic. Morgaine swore that every 7th generation, the curse would fully activate, slowly draining the life from the ruling family and the land itself until nothing remained. Father, we are the 7th generation." The words hit Damien like a physical blow. He staggered back, his legs suddenly weak. This couldn't be true. Yet even as denial rose in his throat, pieces began clicking into place. Alara's mysterious late-night excursions in her final year, her increasing interest in the old texts, the secret meetings she'd thought he didn't know about, and the fact that she'd died so suddenly, so mysteriously, despite being young and healthy. "I've been searching for a way to break the curse," the letter continued, "and I found it, Father. I found the answer in a prophecy written by Morgaine herself. She wasn't completely without mercy. She left a way to undo what she'd done. But it requires 3 trials, 3 tests of the heart, to prove that our bloodline has learned the lessons she intended. I began these trials, Father. I passed the first, the trial of compassion, by dedicating myself to helping our poorest citizens. But I never got to attempt the second. The curse, it knew what I was doing. It came for me earlier than expected." Damien's hands clenched around the paper, nearly tearing it. His daughter had been fighting for their kingdom, and he'd known nothing. He'd been so consumed with his duties, so distant in his grief over losing his wife years before, that he'd failed to see his daughter's struggle. But there is still hope. The girl who brings you this letter, please, Father, do not harm her. She is pure of heart and brave beyond measure. She held my hand as I died and promised to complete my mission. I gave her the map to the Shrine of Shadows, where the second and third trials await. Father, you must complete these trials. You must face the tests of truth and sacrifice. Only then can the curse be broken. Only then can our kingdom be saved. The shrine lies beyond the Whispering Woods, in the Valley of Lost Souls. The map is hidden in my chambers, behind the portrait of Mother. But beware. The trials are designed to break even the strongest spirit. You will need help. You will need to trust again. You will need to open your heart. I know how hard that will be for you. I know you closed yourself off after Mother died, that you became the cold, feared ruler to protect yourself from more pain. But that is exactly what the curse wants. It feeds on isolation, on grief, on hearts that refuse to heal. Please, Father, let people in. Trust the girl who brings you this letter. She has a role to play in all of this. I saw it in the prophecy, though I don't fully understand it yet. Morgaine's words spoke of a heart untouched by immortality, a light that shines in voluntary darkness. I believe that refers to her. I love you, Father. I have always loved you, even when you pushed me away, even when duty made you cold. I understood, and I forgive you for the times you weren't there, for the moments you were too wrapped in responsibility to see me. Please forgive yourself too, and live, truly live, not just exist as a king, but as a man. That is what Mother would have wanted. That is what I want. Break the curse, save our people, and perhaps in so doing, save yourself. Your loving daughter, Alara. P.S. The trials will begin when you are ready. You'll know because the tomb will show you the way. The moment Damien finished reading, a brilliant light erupted from his daughter's tomb. He stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. The marble structure began to tremble, and the ancient symbols carved into its surface glowed with golden fire. Then, slowly, a section of the tomb's base slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small crystal sphere pulsing with otherworldly light, and beneath it, a rolled parchment. Damien reached for them with shaking hands. The sphere felt warm, alive almost, humming with energy. The parchment was another message, this one shorter. The first trial awaits at the shrine. You have 7 days before the curse claims its next victim. The clock is already ticking, Father. Run. Damien looked up at the tomb, tears finally spilling freely down his cheeks. I'm sorry, Alara. I'm so sorry. The light pulsed once, as if in response, then faded. He had 7 days to save his kingdom, and he'd need that maid's help to do it. Kira didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small chamber in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of her encounter with the king. His rage, his pain, the way his voice had cracked when he ordered her away, it all swirled in her mind like a storm she couldn't escape. The answer came at dawn. A sharp knock jolted her from her restless thoughts. Before she could rise, the door burst open. 2 of the king's personal guards stood in the doorway, their expressions grim. You're to come with us, the taller one said, his hand resting on his sword hilt. The king commands your presence. Now. Kira's stomach dropped. This was it. He decided I was lying, or worse, that I'd somehow played a role in Alara's death. I'd be executed, thrown in the dungeons, or... I said now, the guard repeated. Kira scrambled to her feet, not even bothering to change from her nightgown. She threw on her cloak and followed the guards through the castle's winding corridors. Servants pressed themselves against walls as they passed, whispering behind their hands. Word had clearly spread that something significant was happening. They led her not to the dungeons, as she'd feared, but to the king's private study, a room few ever entered and fewer left unchanged. The guards pushed open the heavy oak doors and gestured her inside. "The king will see you alone," one said, then pulled the doors shut behind her. The study was magnificent and intimidating in equal measure. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with ancient tomes and scrolls. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, covered in maps and documents. And standing before the tall windows, silhouetted against the rising sun, was King Damien. He didn't turn when she entered. "Tell me everything about that day," he said quietly. "Leave nothing out." Kira swallowed hard. "Your Majesty, everything." His voice was firmer now, though still controlled. "Every word my daughter spoke, every moment leading to her death, I need to know."
So Kira told him. She described traveling to market that morning, hearing the terrible crash, running toward the overturned carriage. She recounted finding Princess Alara trapped beneath the wreckage, the guards already dead, the horses fled. She spoke of the princess's injuries, too severe, too many, and how Alara had known immediately that she was dying. "She wasn't afraid," Kira said softly. "That's what struck me most. She was calm, almost resigned, like she'd been preparing for this possibility." Damien's shoulders tensed, but he remained silent. "She asked my name," Kira continued. "Then she asked if I was kind. I didn't understand the question at first, but she insisted. She said she needed someone kind, someone who understood what it meant to love something worth dying for. I told her about my mother, about how the princess had saved her years ago. And then she gave you the letter," Damien said. "Yes. She pressed it into my hands and made me swear on my mother's life that I would deliver it to you, no matter what it took. She said," she hesitated. "Say it." "She said you would need someone to remind you what it meant to be human, that the trials ahead would break you if you faced them alone." Finally, Damien turned. His face was haggard, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and grief. But there was something else there now, too. Determination. "My daughter left instructions," he said, moving to his desk. He spread out a hand-drawn map, the one he'd retrieved from behind his late wife's portrait. "There's a shrine beyond the Whispering Woods. According to her letter, it holds trials that must be completed to break a curse on our bloodline." Kira stepped closer, studying the map. It showed a path through dense forest, across a river marked with warning symbols, and into a valley surrounded by mountains. At the valley's center was a structure labeled simply Shrine of Shadows. "Alara believed you have a role to play in this," Damien continued, his eyes fixed on Kira with unsettling intensity. "The prophecy mentioned a heart untouched by immortality. You're human, mortal. Perhaps that's significant." "You want me to come with you?" Kira asked, incredulous. "I don't want anything," Damien said coldly. "But my daughter trusted you, and I have 7 days to complete these trials before the curse claims another victim. I cannot afford to ignore any advantage, even one I don't understand." "7 days?" Kira's eyes widened. "But Your Majesty, the kingdom—" "Will be managed by my council in my absence. I've already made arrangements." He rolled up the map and secured it with a leather strap. "We leave within the hour. Gather whatever you need. Practical clothing, sturdy boots, leave sentiment behind." Kira's mind reeled. An hour ago, she'd been a simple maid. Now she was being commanded to journey into dangerous territory with the most feared ruler in the realm. "Your Majesty, I'm not trained for this," she protested. "I'm not a warrior or a scholar. I'm just—" "You're what my daughter chose," Damien interrupted. "That will have to be enough." He paused, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. She was an excellent judge of character. She saw something in you worth trusting. I will attempt to do the same." The words were awkward, clearly difficult for him to speak, but they were also genuine. Kira took a deep breath. Princess Alara had saved her mother's life. Now, perhaps Kira could help save the princess's kingdom. "I'll be ready," she said firmly. Damien nodded once. "Good. Meet me at the eastern gate, and Kira," he caught her eyes one last time, "if you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate deception, I will know, and no force in this world will save you from my wrath." "I understand, Your Majesty." "I doubt that," he said quietly, "but you will." As Kira hurried back to her quarters to prepare, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The tomb's glow had been a warning. The real trials were only just beginning. The eastern gate loomed before them, its iron bars twisted into shapes meant to ward off evil. Beyond it lay the Whispering Woods, a place of legend and fear where even the bravest hunters refused to venture after dark. It was barely past dawn when Kira arrived, dressed in borrowed travel clothes that hung slightly loose on her frame. A small pack containing water, dried food, and a spare cloak was strapped to her back. She felt woefully unprepared for whatever lay ahead. King Damien was already waiting, his appearance transformed, gone were the royal robes and crown. Instead, he wore dark traveling clothes, a long coat, and sturdy boots. A sword hung at his hip, and she noticed several other weapons concealed about him. He looked less like a king and more like a dangerous predator. "You're late," he said, though the sun had barely cleared the horizon. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Don't call me that out here," Davian interrupted. "Names hold power, and there are things in these woods that would love to know a vampire king walks among them. Call me Damien, or call me nothing." It felt wrong, disrespectful, to address him so casually, but Kira nodded. "Yes, you're Damien." His lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of amusement, but it vanished before Kira could be certain. Two horses stood ready, stamping their hooves nervously. Damien mounted his, a massive black stallion, with practiced ease. Kira approached her own mount, a gentler gray mare, with considerably less confidence. "You can ride?" Damien asked. Sort of," Kira admitted, struggling to pull herself into the saddle. On her third attempt, she finally managed it, though hardly gracefully. Damien watched with barely concealed impatience. "We'll be lucky to reach the shrine before the curse claims us all," he muttered, then kicked his horse forward. Kira's mare followed automatically, and soon they were passing through the gate into the wilderness beyond. The Whispering Woods earned their name immediately. Even in daylight, the ancient trees seemed to lean toward them, their branches creating a canopy so thick that only scattered beams of sunlight penetrated. And everywhere, from the rustling leaves, the creaking branches, the wind itself, came whispers. Not quite voices, not quite random noise, something in between, like words spoken in a language just beyond comprehension. "Don't listen to them," Damien said without turning around. "The woods try to confuse travelers, make them lose their way. Focus on the path." Easier said than done. The whispers seemed to call Kira's name, to promise answers to questions she hadn't asked. She shook her head, forcing her attention to Damien's back. They rode in silence for over an hour, the path growing narrower and more treacherous. Twisted roots threatened to trip the horses, and more than once, Kira had to duck beneath low-hanging branches that seemed to reach for her deliberately. "May I ask something?" Kira finally ventured. "You just did. About Princess Alara. What was she like? I mean, I saw her kindness, but what was she like with you?" Damien was quiet for so long that Kira assumed he wouldn't answer. Then softly, "Stubborn? Brilliant? Too brave for her own good." He paused. "She was like her mother in that way. My wife never knew when to retreat, when to accept that some battles couldn't be won. How did you lose her, your wife?"
Same way I lost my daughter, Damien said bitterly. She tried to solve a problem alone instead of asking for help. There was a plague in the southern villages. She went to provide aid. Against my wishes, she contracted the illness and died within days. His hands tightened on the reins. Vampires are immune to most diseases, but not that one. It was magical in nature, designed specifically to target our kind. "I'm sorry," Kira said softly. "Sorry doesn't bring them back." The words were harsh, but Kira heard the pain beneath them. They rode on, the whispers growing louder. Now Kira could almost make out words. Turn back. Danger ahead. Foolish mortals. Doomed. "It's getting worse," she said. "We're approaching the heart of the woods. The whispers are a defense mechanism, meant to drive away intruders. It means we're going the right direction." As if in response to his words, the path ahead suddenly forked into 3 directions. Damien pulled his horse to a stop, consulting the map. His brow furrowed. "The map shows only one path," he said. "Then which one do we take?" Kira asked, studying the 3 options. They all looked identical, narrow trails disappearing into increasingly dark forest. Damien dismounted and approached each path, examining them carefully. There should be a marker. Alara wrote that the true path would reveal itself to those who... He stopped abruptly, his eyes fixing on something. Kira climbed down from her horse and joined him. There, carved into a tree at the center fork, was a symbol, a rose entwined with a crescent moon, Princess Alara's personal seal. But something was wrong. The symbol was upside down. "It's a warning, or a test." He studied the other 2 paths, then the ground, then the trees themselves. The middle path is marked with her seal, but inverted. That could mean it's the wrong choice, a trap. Or it could mean we need to think inversely. "What if we're overthinking it?" Kira suggested. She approached the left path, noting how the trees seemed slightly less twisted, the whispers slightly quieter. Then she noticed something caught on a low branch, a single white flower, partially wilted. "A white rose," she breathed, "like the ones I've been leaving at the tomb." Damien moved to her side, plucking the flower carefully. Ilara loved white roses. She planted an entire garden of them. He examined the flower more closely. This was placed here recently, within days. "But how? She's been gone for 3 years." "Magic," Damien said grimly. "The shrine is already testing us, showing us what we need to see." He made a decision, mounting his horse and guiding it toward the left path. "This way. If I'm wrong, we'll find out soon enough." Kira followed, her heart pounding. The whispers rose to a crescendo as they committed to the path, then suddenly fell silent. The absence of sound was somehow worse than the noise. They'd made their choice. Now they'd live with the consequences. The left path wound deeper into the woods, the air growing colder with each mile. Kira pulled her cloak tighter, noticing how their breath now formed clouds in the suddenly frigid air. This made no sense. It was late spring, and the morning had been warm. "The temperature shouldn't be dropping like this," she said. "We're leaving the natural world behind. The shrine exists between realms, part of our world, part of something else. The closer we get, the stranger things will become." As if to prove his point, the trees ahead began to thin, revealing an impossible sight. Where there should have been more forest was instead a river, but not like any Kira had ever seen. The water was perfectly still, like glass, reflecting the sky above with such clarity that it was impossible to tell where the river ended and the heavens began. The surface shimmered with colors that shouldn't exist, deep purples, silver blues, and something that could only be described as liquid starlight. "The River of Reflections," Damien said, consulting the map. "According to Alara's notes, we must cross it, but there's a warning here. See yourself truly, or drown in lies." "What does that mean?" Kira asked, approaching the water's edge cautiously. "I don't know, but I suspect we're about to find out." There was no bridge, no boat, no obvious way across. The river stretched at least 50 yards wide, and despite its calm surface, Kira sensed something dangerous lurking within its depths. Damien dismounted and approached the water. The moment his shadow touched the surface, the river rippled. Then, slowly, an image formed in the water. Not his reflection, but something else entirely. Kira gasped. In the water's surface, she saw a scene playing out, like a memory made visible. A younger Damien stood in a nursery, holding an infant, Ilara, but his expression was distant, distracted. A woman, his wife, presumably, stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband fail to connect with their newborn daughter. "Stop it," Damien growled, stepping back from the water's edge. But the images continued, shifting to show other moments. Ilara as a child, reaching for her father's hand, only to be dismissed as he buried himself in state duties. Ilara as a teenager, showing him a book she'd written, her face falling as he barely glanced at it before returning to state documents. Ilara, just weeks before her death, standing outside his study, hand raised to knock, then lowering it and walking away with shoulders slumped in defeat. "Stop it!" Damien's voice cracked with anguish. The images froze, then faded. The water returned to its mirror-like calm. "The river shows truth," Kira said softly, understanding dawning. "Your truth, your regrets. I don't need a magical river to remind me of my failures," Damien said bitterly. He turned away, his jaw clenched. "I know what I was, what I am." Kira hesitated, then approached the water herself. Immediately, images began forming for her as well. She saw herself as a young girl, watching her mother work herself to exhaustion. She saw herself taking a job at the castle, sending money home, but rarely visiting. Her mother, alone and aging, looking at the door as if hoping her daughter might walk through. Then she saw the day Princess Alara died, but this time, the scene was different. She watched herself from an outside perspective, saw how her hands had trembled, how tears had streamed down her face as she held the dying princess, but she also saw something she hadn't noticed in the moment, how her presence had brought Alara comfort, how the princess's fear had lessened because someone was there, bearing witness to her final moments. "You gave her peace," Damien's voice came from behind her. He watched the images too. "You gave her kindness." The images shifted once more, showing Kira's mother, smiling despite her worn face, holding the money her daughter sent and using it to help neighbors in need. The truth wasn't what Kira had feared, that she'd abandoned her mother. The truth was that her mother was proud of her, grateful for her help, and understood why Kira needed to leave to make a better life. The images faded. Kira wiped tears from her cheeks. The river shows us what we need to see, not just our failures, but the complete truth, including the parts we were too afraid or too guilty to acknowledge. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he approached the water again, this time without flinching. The images returned, the same memories, but now they continued beyond what he'd seen before. He saw Alara in her room, looking at a portrait of him, smiling despite everything. He saw her writing in a journal. "Father is distant, but I know he loves me. He just doesn't know how to show it anymore. That's okay. I love him enough for both of us. He saw her final moments, not from Kira's perspective, but as Alara herself experienced them. And in those moments, she wasn't thinking of her pain or fear. She was thinking, I hope Father finds the letter. I hope this saves him. I hope he learns to be happy again. A single tear rolled down Damien's cheek, then another. He made no move to wipe them away. She forgave me, he whispered. Even at the end, she thought of me. She loved you, Kira said gently. That's what children do. Damien nodded slowly. Then he did something Kira never expected. He smiled. It was small, sad, and fleeting, but it was genuine. Thank you, he said quietly, for being with her, for keeping your promise. Before Kira could respond, the river began to glow. The water's surface solidified into what looked like crystal, forming a bridge wide enough for them and their horses. We've passed the first test, Damien said, his voice steadier now. The truth has set us free to continue. They led their horses onto the crystalline bridge. It held firm beneath their weight, though Kira could see through it to impossible depths below, stars and galaxies swimming in darkness. On the other side, the river, the whispering woods, ended abruptly. Before them lay the Valley of Lost Souls, and rising in its center, black stone against a blood-red sky, stood the Shrine of Shadows. The moment they crossed the bridge, everything changed. The crystalline path dissolved behind them, ensuring there would be no retreat. The sky above shifted from the familiar blue of day to a perpetual twilight, deep red near the horizon, fading to purple overhead, with stars visible despite the lingering light. This place doesn't follow natural laws, Kira whispered, her voice seeming to echo strangely in the still air. No, Damien agreed. We're fully in the magical realm now. Time, space, physics, they all bend to the will of whatever force created this place. The valley stretched before them, covered in dead grass that crunched beneath their feet. Scattered throughout were structures, ruins of what might have once been a civilization. Broken pillars rose from the ground like bones, and crumbled buildings dotted the landscape, covered in vines that glowed faintly with bioluminescent light. And everywhere, so thick it was hard to see more than 20 yards ahead, was mist. The horses whinnied nervously, refusing to go further. Damien tried to calm his stallion, but the animal reared back, eyes wide with primal fear. They won't go any farther, he said, dismounting. Kira slid from her mare, relieved to be on solid ground, but terrified of what lay ahead. They secured the horses to a fallen pillar, leaving them with water and feed, though both wondered silently if they'd ever return to reclaim them. Stay close, Damien instructed, drawing his sword. The blade gleamed in the strange twilight. The earned the name. It's said to be filled with the souls of those who attempted the trials and failed. That's comforting, Kira muttered, but she pressed closer to him nonetheless. They walked into the mist, their footsteps muffled by the dead grass. The mist grew thicker with each step, cold and damp against their skin. Shapes moved within it, suggestions of figures that vanished when looked at directly. Then the voices started. Damien. The whisper was feminine, achingly familiar. He froze. That's not possible. Damien, my love, why didn't you save me? It's the valley, Kira said urgently, grabbing his arm. It's trying to trick you. Remember the river. We faced our truths there. This is different. This is deception. But Damien's eyes had glazed over, fixed on something in the mist. A figure was forming. A woman with long dark hair and gentle eyes. She wore a flowing dress and smiled sadly. Liana, Damien breathed, his sword lowering. Don't listen to her, Kira insisted, but even as she spoke, she heard her own voice echoing through the mist. Kira, darling, why did you leave me?
She spun around to see her mother emerging from the fog, looking exactly as she had the last time she saw her, aged, tired, disappointed. "Mama," Kira's voice cracked, "you abandoned me, your own mother. For what? To serve in a castle? To chase a dead princess's ghost? I died alone because of you." "No," Kira whispered, tears streaming. "No, that's not true. You're not dead. You can't be." "She's not," Damien said firmly, breaking free from his own trance. He grabbed Kira's shoulders, forcing her to look at him instead of the apparition. The appearance of Kira's mother shrieked and dissolved into mist. But Damien's wife remained, her expression shifting from sadness to something darker. "You've already forgotten me, haven't you? Bringing this girl on your quest? Are you replacing me? Replacing our daughter?" "You're not Liana," Damien said, though pain laced his words. "My wife was kind. She would never speak with such cruelty." "Your wife was a fool," the apparition hissed. "She died for nothing. And now your daughter is dead too. You destroy everything you touch. You should stay here, Damien. Stay in this valley. It's where you belong, among the lost and the damned." "No," Damien said, his voice growing stronger. He raised his sword and pointed it at the figure. "I've made mistakes. I've failed the people I loved. But I'm still here, still fighting. That's what Alara wanted. That's what Liana would have wanted. So whatever you are, whatever dark magic animates you, be gone." The figure of Liana screamed, a sound like wind through a graveyard, and exploded into dark smoke. Silence fell over the valley, broken only by their ragged breathing. "More will come," Damien said. "The valley won't give up easily. We need to move quickly toward the shrine." They pressed forward through the mist, and true to his words, more figures emerged. Some were people they recognized. Kira saw childhood friends who died young. Damien saw soldiers who had fallen under his command. Others were stranger, faceless shapes that whispered promises of peace if they'd only give up, only stop trying, only accept defeat. But now they knew the truth. These were lies wrapped in familiar forms. Every time a figure appeared, they acknowledged it, recognized the grain of truth in the guilt or fear it represented, and then dismissed it as the deception it was. "I failed my soldiers," Damien said, as a battalion of ghostly warriors surrounded them. "I left my mother," Kira said, as her mother's face appeared again and again in different forms. The apparitions grew weaker with each acknowledgement, until finally, they stopped appearing altogether. The mist began to thin, and there, less than 100 yards ahead, the Shrine of Shadows rose into the blood-red sky.
It was massive, a structure of black stone, covered in the same glowing symbols they'd seen on Alara's tomb. Steps led up to a grand entrance, flanked by statues of hooded figures. Above the doorway was carved a message in ancient script that somehow, impossibly, they could both read. "Those who enter must face what they hide. Truth is the key, and sacrifice the price." Damien and Kira exchanged glances. "Together?" Kira asked. "Together," Damien agreed. They climbed the steps side by side and crossed into the Shrine of Shadows. Behind them, the valley mist closed in, sealing them inside. The shrine's interior was vast, far larger than should have been possible given its external dimensions. Columns of black stone rose toward a ceiling lost in darkness. The floor was smooth obsidian, polished to such a shine that it reflected everything like still water. Glowing runes covered the walls, pulsing with a rhythm that matched their heartbeats. At the chamber's center stood a circular platform, and hovering above it was a sphere of pure light, the same light that had emanated from Alara's tomb. "The second trial," Damien said, his voice echoing strangely in the vast space. As they approached the platform, the sphere pulsed brighter. Then, without warning, it shot toward Damien, striking him in the chest. "Damien!" Kira rushed forward, but he held up a hand, stopping her.
It's fine, he said, though his voice was strained. It's showing me something. His eyes glazed over, and Kiara realized he was seeing a vision, something only he could perceive. She stood helplessly, watching emotions play across his face. Pain, shock, horror, and finally, understanding. When his eyes focused again, they were filled with unspeakable sorrow. "What did you see?" Kira asked gently. "The truth about Alara's death," Damien said hoarsely. "The curse didn't chill her randomly. It targeted her because she was trying to break it. She knew the risks, knew that attempting the trials might cause the curse to strike back, and she did it anyway. She died because I was too closed off, too consumed by my own grief over Liana to see that she needed help. If I'd been a better father, if I'd actually talked to her instead of drowning in duty, she might have told me what she was planning. We could have faced this together." "You can't know that," Kiara said, kneeling beside him. "Can't I?" Damien's laugh was bitter. "The curse feeds on isolation, on broken connections. Alara died alone because her father had made himself unreachable. That's the truth I've been hiding from. Not just that I failed her, but that my failure directly caused her death." The sphere pulsed again, and this time it struck Kiara. She gasped as visions flooded her mind. She saw Princess Alara in the months before her death. Not just the confident, kind ruler everyone knew, but the scared young woman beneath. She saw Alara crying alone in her chambers, terrified of the task ahead, but unwilling to burden anyone else. She saw Alara practice magic in secret, trying to prepare for trials she barely understood. And she saw the accident, the one that killed Alara. But now Kira understood it wasn't truly an accident at all. The curse had manifested as dark creatures that attacked the carriage, causing it to crash. Alara had used the last of her magic to fight them off, to save her guards' lives. But in doing so, she'd exhausted herself. By the time Kiara found her, Alara was dying not from the crash injuries, but from magical depletion. "She sacrificed herself to save others," Kiara whispered as the vision ended. "The trial of truth," a voice echoed through the chamber. "Feminine, ancient, neither kind nor cruel. You have seen what you refused to see. You have acknowledged what you refused to accept. But truth alone is not enough. You must speak it aloud. You must name your failures without excuse or justification. Only then can you move forward." Damien stood slowly, his jaw clenched. "Very well." He took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice rang clear through the shrine. "I failed my wife by not being present, by burying my emotions in duty until she felt alone, even in our marriage. When she died, I used that same duty as a shield against grief, against connection with my daughter. I became a king, but stopped being a father." The sphere glowed brighter with each word. "I failed Alara by making her feel she had to face the world alone, by being so closed off that she couldn't come to me with her fears, her discoveries, her plans. She died trying to save a kingdom I was too blind to realize was cursed. And she died alone because I had made myself unreachable." A tear rolled down his cheek. "I loved them both, and I failed them both. That is my truth." The sphere split in two, one half remaining above the platform, the other drifting toward Kiara. She understood. It was her turn. "I failed my mother," Kiara said, her voice shaking but steady. "Not in the ways I feared, not by abandoning her or neglecting her needs, but I failed her by not trusting in her love. I spent years feeling guilty for leaving, never realizing she was proud of me. I let guilt color every interaction, every letter, instead of celebrating the life I was building." She paused, gathering courage. "And I failed Princess Alara. I held her hand as she died, yes. I brought the letter to the king, but I waited 3 years. 3 years while this curse continued to spread, while the kingdom suffered. I was too afraid, too convinced of my own insignificance to act sooner. How many people suffered because I was too cowardly to approach the king immediately? You didn't fail, Damien said quietly. You were one person, powerless in a system designed to keep people like you away from people like me. That doesn't absolve me, Kiara replied. I could have tried harder. I let fear stop me. That is my truth. The two halves of the sphere merged back together, blazing with brilliant light. The voice spoke again. Truth acknowledged, truth accepted, truth spoken without excuse or justification. The trial of truth is complete. But know this, truth without action is meaningless. The next trial will demand more than words. It will demand sacrifice. The sphere shot upward and disappeared into the ceiling. Where it had been, the floor split open, revealing a descending staircase carved into the stone. The third trial, Kiara said. The final one, Damien agreed. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Whatever it demands, whatever sacrifice is required, we'll face it, Kiara interrupted. Together. They descended into the darkness below. The staircase spiraled downward for what felt like miles, the air growing warmer with each step. The walls were covered in carvings, scenes of ancient rituals, people making offerings, kingdoms rising and falling. At the bottom, they emerged into a circular chamber dominated by an altar of white stone. On the altar lay 2 daggers, their blades glowing with inner light. Between them was a golden chalice, empty and waiting. The trial of sacrifice. Damien approached the altar cautiously. Carved into the stone were words that made Kiara's blood run cold. The curse was born of sacrifice, a mother's life for her daughter's justice. Only sacrifice can break it. Blood of the willing, freely given, one life to save a kingdom. Choose or all will fall.
No, Kiara whispered. No, there has to be another way. But even as she spoke, a translucent figure materialized above the altar. The ghost of a woman in ancient robes, her eyes blazing with power and grief. I am Morgaine Blackthorn, the spirit said, her voice echoing with otherworldly resonance. 3 centuries ago, King Aldrich Ashford executed my daughter for the crime of practicing magic. She was young, gifted, and foolish, yes, but she was also trying to help people. She healed the sick, brought rain to drought-stricken lands, and for that, she was burned. Morgaine's form flickered with rage. I offered myself in exchange for her life. I begged Aldrich to take me instead, but he refused. He said no mercy could be shown, lest others be emboldened to practice forbidden arts. So I watched my daughter die, screaming, while her king looked on with cold indifference. And you cursed his bloodline? Damien said. Every 7th generation would suffer as you suffered. Yes, Morgaine confirmed, but I am not without mercy. I left a way to break the curse. 3 trials: compassion, truth, and sacrifice. Alara passed the first by dedicating herself to helping the poor. You have passed the second by confronting your failures. Now comes the third. She gestured to the daggers. One of you must give your life freely, willingly, for the sake of the kingdom. Only then will the curse be lifted. Only blood can pay for blood. Take me, Damien said immediately, reaching for a dagger. No, Kiara grabbed his arm. You're the king. Your people need you. My people will find another king, but Alara died because of my failures. I won't let anyone else pay that price. He pulled free of her grasp and lifted the dagger. I choose sacrifice, my life for the kingdom. Reet, Morgaine said, and power filled her voice, freezing Damien in place. Sacrifice is meaningless if it's merely dramatic martyrdom. You're willing to die, Vampire King, but are you willing to live? To open your heart again? To risk pain?
To be the father and husband you failed to be? Death is easy. Living with your failures and choosing to do better, that is the harder path. She turned to Kira. And you, girl, you're willing to let him die to save himself from guilt. But are you willing to fight for him to live? To tell him that his life has value beyond his crown? That he deserves a chance at redemption? Kira's mind reeled. What do you understand? What are you asking? The curse requires sacrifice, but not the sacrifice you think. My daughter died because Aldrich valued justice over compassion, rules over humanity. He sacrificed mercy for the sake of order. The curse can only be broken by the opposite sacrifice, by choosing love over duty, forgiveness over judgment, hope over despair. She looked between them. Alara understood this. She passed the trial of compassion by caring for others. She left you the trial of truth so you would face your pain. And now, the trial of sacrifice asks this: will you sacrifice your grief, your guilt, your walls? Will you choose to forgive yourselves and each other? Will you let go of the past's pain and embrace the possibility of a better future? Damien lowered the dagger slowly. You're saying the sacrifice isn't death? The sacrifice is worse than death, for some, Morgaine replied. It's vulnerability. It's trust. It's letting people in even when you're terrified of losing them. That is what my daughter died for. The belief that connection matters more than power, that love matters more than law. She raised her hand, and the daggers transformed. Instead of blades, they became keys. 1 silver, 1 gold. Take up the keys, Morgaine commanded. But know this, the silver key will unlock your hearts to each other, forcing you to trust, to rely on one another, to care. The gold key will unlock the curse, but only if you've truly sacrificed your isolation. Both of you must choose this. Both must be willing. Kira looked at Damien. He was a vampire king, centuries old, powerful beyond measure. She was a peasant girl, mortal and weak. What did they possibly offer each other? But then she remembered their journey, how he'd protected her in the valley, how she had kept him focused by the river, how they had faced their truths together, made each other stronger. I choose to trust you, Kira said. Choose to believe that broken people can heal, that failures don't define us, that we're stronger together than apart. Damien stared at the gold key, his hand trembling. For centuries, he had held everyone at arm's length. The pain of losing Liana, then Alara, had convinced him that connection meant inevitable loss. But Alara had trusted Kira with her final message, and that trust had brought him here, to this moment where he had a chance to break the curse and save his kingdom. He took the gold key. I choose to try, he said quietly, to be more than a king, to let people in, to honor my daughter by being the man she believed I could be. Then the trials are complete, Morgaine said, and for the first time, she smiled. The curse is broken. Light exploded from the keys, filling the chamber with warmth. The light from the keys swirled together, silver and gold merging into a brilliant white radiance that engulfed Damien and Kira. It wasn't painful. Instead, it felt like warmth spreading through their bodies, through their very souls, burning away something dark and cold they hadn't even realized was there. Morgaine's spirit grew brighter, more solid, as if the breaking of the curse was freeing her as well. For 300 years, I have been bound to this place, Morgaine said, her voice clearer now, more human. Bound by my own rage, by the curse I created. I told myself it was justice, but it was only pain spreading more pain. Alara understood that. She showed me there was another way. Alara came here? Damien asked, shocked. When? 6 months before she died. She made it through the whispering woods, across the river of reflections, through the valley of lost souls. She passed the trial of compassion before she even arrived by dedicating herself to helping your people. And she spoke with me. Morgaine's expression softened with memory.
She didn't beg for mercy or offer hollow apologies for her ancestors' crimes. Instead, she asked about my daughter. What was her name? What did she love? What were her dreams? She treated my daughter's memory with respect, with genuine care, and in doing so, she made me remember that my daughter would have hated what I became. The spirit moved to where symbols glowed on the walls, the same symbols that covered Alara's tomb. Your daughter helped me redesign the trials. The original curse demanded actual death as payment, but Alara convinced me that true sacrifice is about transformation, not destruction. She said, pain should teach, not destroy. Grief should connect, not isolate. Tears fell freely down Damien's face now. That sounds like her. She was dying when she left here, Morgaine continued. The curse had already marked her because she had interfered with its design, but she didn't regret it. She said it was worth it if it meant you might have a chance to heal, to save the kingdom. She loved you so much, Vampire King, even when you pushed her away. The light from the keys began to pulse, sending waves of energy through the floor, up the walls, throughout the entire shrine. The building shook, but not with destruction, with release. The curse is breaking. It's being pulled from the land, from your bloodline, from every place it took root. Your people will feel it. Crops will suddenly flourish. Illnesses will lift. The sense of dread that's hung over the kingdom will dissipate. They'll know something has changed, even if they don't understand what.
Okay, she said softly, but only if I can bring my mother here, and only if you promise to actually listen when I advise you, not just let me be a decoration. Damien's smile widened. You have my word, though I suspect you'll find me a much better listener than I used to be. Over the following weeks, the kingdom transformed. Crops that had been failing suddenly flourished. Illnesses that had plagued the population vanished. But more importantly, King Damien himself changed. He began holding open councils where citizens could bring concerns directly to him. He visited villages in person, listening to people's needs. He donated funds to rebuild schools and hospitals. And he started a scholarship in Alara's name for young women who wanted to study magic, medicine, or governance, ensuring his daughter's dream of helping others would continue. Kira brought her mother to the castle, and the older woman's tears of joy made every hardship worthwhile. She worked alongside Damien, discovering she had a talent for understanding what people needed and finding ways to provide it. And sometimes, late at night, Damien and Kara would walk in the gardens together, talking about Alara, about loss, about healing. They planted white roses in her memory, an entire garden of them. "Do you think she can see us, Kara?" asked one evening as they sat among the roses. "Do you think she knows the curse is broken?" "I think," Damien said carefully, "that wherever she is, she's at peace. She saved us, Kara, not just from the curse, but from ourselves. She forced us to face our pain, to open our hearts, to choose connection over isolation." He looked at Kara, his expression soft in the moonlight. "I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in centuries, I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm not afraid to care again, to let people close, to risk my heart. That's what Alara gave us, the courage to be vulnerable." Kara smiled. "Then let's not waste it." In the distance, the castle glowed with warm light, filled with laughter, with music, with life. The curse was broken. The kingdom was healing, and two broken souls had found their way back from the darkness, guided by a princess's love and a maid's promise. The story of the vampire king and the maid who saved him would be told for generations. But for them, it wasn't about legend or glory. It was simply about second chances, about choosing to live rather than merely survive. About the transformative power of keeping promises and opening hearts. Alara's tomb stood in the cemetery, covered now with white roses that bloomed year-round, regardless of season. And if you listened closely on quiet nights, you could almost hear a young woman's voice on the wind whispering, "Thank you, Father. I always knew you could do it. I love you."
What happens to you? Kira asked the spirit.
Morgaine smiled, a genuine, peaceful expression.
I finally get to rest. My daughter has been waiting for me for 3 centuries. It's time I joined her.
She began to fade, her form becoming transparent. But before I go, I have a gift for you both. She gestured, and images formed in the light around them. They saw Alara, not as a ghost or memory, but as she had been, vibrant and alive. She was in the shrine speaking with Morgaine. "Father will come," Alara was saying in the vision. "I know he will. He's lost right now, drowning in grief and duty, but he's still in there. The man who used to sing to me when I was small, who taught me to ride horses, who once stopped an entire royal procession because I wanted to pick flowers. That man is still there. This curse can save him by forcing him to find himself again." "And if it doesn't work?" Morgaine's past self asked in the vision. "Then at least I tried. At least I did everything I could to save him and our kingdom. That's all any of us can do, our best, even when we're afraid." The vision shifted to show Alara writing the letter that Kira had carried. They watched her seal it with her crest, then whisper a spell over it, a protection charm to keep it safe until it reached her father's hands. "I trust you, Father," the vision of Alara said, though she was alone. "I trust you to be strong enough to finish this. I trust you to let people help you. I trust you to live, not just survive. Please, prove me right." The vision faded. Morgaine was now barely visible, just a faint outline of light and voice. "She never doubted you," the spirit said to Damien. "Even in death, her faith in you never wavered. Honor that faith. Be the king, the man, the father she believed in." "I will," Damien promised, his voice breaking. "I swear it." Morgaine turned to Kira. "And you, girl with the kind heart, you think you're ordinary, powerless, but you carried hope across 3 years of doubt. You kept a promise when it would have been easier to forget it. You stood beside a king in trials meant to break spirits. You are far stronger than you know." "I just did what was right," Kira said softly. "Exactly. And that is the rarest strength of all. The world needs people like you. People who do what is right simply because it's right, not for glory or reward." The spirit was almost completely gone now, just a whisker of light and voice. "The curse is broken. The kingdom is saved. But your story isn't over. You've been given a second chance. Use it well. Live. Love. Let yourselves be happy. That is the true victory over curses and grief." With those final words, Morgaine Blackthorn's spirit vanished, finally at peace. The keys in their hands dissolved into particles of light that sank into their skin, leaving behind a warm, tingling sensation. The shrine began to crack, light pouring through the fractures. "It's collapsing!" Kira shouted. "No," Damien said, grabbing her hand. "It's transforming. The shrine was a prison for Morgaine's rage. Now that she's free, it has no purpose. Run." It burst from the shrine's entrance as the entire structure collapsed behind them, black stone crumbling into dust that sparkled in the air like dark snow. But where the shrine had stood, something new began to grow. Flowers. White roses erupting from the ground in impossible abundance. The Valley of Lost Souls was transforming too. The red sky faded to a natural blue. The mist dissipated, revealing that the ruins weren't completely destroyed. Some buildings remained, ancient but beautiful, as if the valley had been restored to what it was before the curse corrupted it. "It's beautiful," Kira breathed, watching as color returned to the land,
green grass replacing dead vegetation, trees blooming with sudden life. Damien stared at the white roses, his expression a mixture of grief and wonder. Alara loved white roses, he said quietly. She's still here, in a way. In every good thing we do, every choice we make to be better. They made their way back through the valley, which was no longer threatening. The whispers were gone, replaced by the normal sounds of nature, birds singing, wind rustling through healthy trees. When they reached the river of reflections, it had transformed into an ordinary stream, clear and shallow enough to wade across. Their horses were waiting where they'd left them, calm now that the magic had dissipated. The ride back through the whispering woods was peaceful, the trees no longer menacing, but simply ancient and majestic. When they emerged from the forest and saw the castle in the distance, they noticed something remarkable. The fields that had been brown and barren were now showing signs of green. People were emerging from their homes, pointing at the sky, at the ground, marveling at changes they couldn't explain. They can feel it, Damien said, the curse lifting, the land healing. When they rode through the castle gates, servants and guards rushed to meet them. The king had been gone for 3 days, days during which his council had grown increasingly worried, but any questions died on their lips when they saw his face. King Damien Ashford was smiling. It was a small smile, tentative and unpracticed, but it was genuine. The cold, closed-off tyrant they'd served was gone, replaced by someone who looked almost human. "Your Majesty," the head counselor approached cautiously, "the kingdom has experienced extraordinary changes. The blight on the crops has reversed. The sick are recovering. It's as if a shadow has been lifted from the land." "It has," Damien said, dismounting. He helped Kira down from her horse, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the watching crowd. "The curse that has plagued our bloodline for generations is broken. Our kingdom is free." Murmurs of shock and confusion rippled through the assembled crowd. Most hadn't even known they were cursed. "There will be time for explanations," Damien continued. "But for now, prepare a feast. We're going to celebrate, properly celebrate, for the first time in too long. And I want everyone invited, not just nobles and council members, but servants, groundskeepers, cooks, stable hands, everyone who calls this kingdom home." The counselor looked stunned. "Everyone, Your Majesty?" "Everyone," Damien confirmed. "It's time we remembered that a kingdom isn't just its ruler, it's all of us working together." He turned to Kira, who stood awkwardly, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her travel-stained clothes, surrounded by finely dressed nobles. "You're not going back to the servants' quarters," Damien said firmly. "You're a hero of this kingdom. You kept a promise for 3 years, helped break an ancient curse, and reminded me what it means to care about others. You'll have proper chambers in the royal wing, a position as my personal advisor if you want it, or freedom to do whatever you choose. You've more than earned it." "I know you don't need it," Damien interrupted gently. "But you've earned it. There's a difference. Let me honor what you've done. Please." Kira thought of her mother, who she'd planned to visit soon. With a position like this, she could bring her mother to the castle, give her a comfortable life in her remaining years. She could actually help people in meaningful ways,